So the other day, I put out a video saying that I was creating a honeypot solution to start catching hackers, and today I'm releasing parts of it. So I've got two honeypots so far that are up in the wild. They are both hosted on Hetzner. I'm planning on adding at least three more, probably all of them hosted on DigitalOcean, and they are all feeding data just on HTTP requests back to a central API that you can view some of the results for. So let's pop open Scout. Scout is my project for actually collecting all of the honeypot data and doing analysis on it. I've got an example open right here of a, it's kind of hard to call it an exploitation attempt, but technically it kind of is. Basically, it is looking for an environment variable file, a .env file that is within the root directory. There are actually several different situations that I could foresee this actually being like a legitimate threat. So for example, if you were to just like take a GitHub repository, clone it down to var www html, and basically create that .env file, put all of your environment variable stuff, and then run it from there, there is a possibility that if you really screw up, it could be available there. Also, if you accidentally exposed like port 80 on the Nginx to basically point to that root directory and you didn't have a web application in front of it, it could technically happen. There are situations where it could happen. I'm not going to just like dump on anybody who has this happen. There are also requests looking for Git configs. So looking for those under the testconfigs.git/config. I'm sure it probably has to do with like an actual vulnerability that I don't know about. And then looking up the backups and the .env. So if we refresh the page, all this is doing is getting the last 10 requests that I've seen. Obviously, most of them are going to be just these root directory searches. This is actually a really common one that I'm probably just going to screen out, honestly, because it's just an uptime checker that I think is just checking the uptime of several different IPs, which is really annoying, honestly. But if you keep refreshing, you'll see them come in real time. Eventually, I plan on actually having them be real time, having some fancy maps and things like that. But all this is really doing right now is returning 200 OK for any URL that is being searched for. It will also capture post bodies. I don't have any post requests here, but it will capture post bodies. So if something tries to post a JSON or something like that up, it will capture that in base64 format. But right now it's very, very simple. It's just returning 200 OKs. Somebody actually made the comment on Twitter that this is basically, I believe he called it a foreskin for the HTTP log, something like that. Yeah. So Ron Smith called it something like a foreskin for the HTTP logs, which isn't necessarily false. I don't know that I would put it that way, but it's not necessarily false. But essentially this is just, HTTP logs. But later on down the line, when I start seeing actual exploitation attempts, what I plan on doing is actually creating simulated responses that I can use to get more information about what the attacker is trying to do. So if there, for example, is a file upload vulnerability that, somebody is trying to exploit in an automated manner, then I will simulate them uploading that vulnerability or that file that they're trying to upload and pull that file down myself and treat it as a piece of malware, do some reverse engineering, figure out what it is that they're trying to deploy, and do some more analysis on it. That can be really, really useful. I'm also going to open this up to not just HTTP requests, so like IoT requests and things like that, and do the same kind of simulation there. I think it would be kind of cool to like quote unquote accidentally leak some credentials and see where they end up. That could be interesting. But my next step is probably going to be SSH and figuring out a way to simulate an SSH server so that I can allow them to brute force in or to use a no password login so that I can see what they're trying to do there. So that FTP, different things like that, that's where you can really start capturing some malware. And I think that could be really, really interesting. So I've got lots of plans for this project going forward. The simulation is the big one with the SSH and the FTP. Like I said, But also, I really want to kind of start digging into some of these requests and seeing if there are like more interesting ones that come in. Most of them are really boring ones like this. Starting to like dig into some of the actual like scanning IPs and trying to like correlate where they're at, what they're doing, what they're trying to do, different things like that. And eventually, I'm going to open up a API that people can use to actually start pulling down this data so they can do whatever they want with it. I want to eventually open source like most of this because I think that would be kind of interesting. Um, just to kind of let other people do their own honeypot experiments. I think it would be kind of cool to like just basically allow anybody to kind of run this thing. But that's further on down the line. I want to get it kind of in a good state first, and I want to figure out what it is I want to do with this like long term, like going on into the future. Because that once you start dealing with open source, you start dealing with open source contributions, and I just don't want to feel. I don't want to deal with the like whiny people involved there. So I'm going to do one more refresh, see if we can catch anything interesting. Nothing yet. That's fine. So yeah, there's going to be a lot more. A lot of people actually like this project, or at least like listening about this project. So that was kind of exciting to get figured out. I want to actually run some vulnerability scanners against my own infrastructure to kind of see what that looks like and to open up some ideas. But at least for right now, I'm going to let this run for a bit, gather a lot of data, and start working on the SSH portion of it. Deploy a couple more honeypots actually, and then start working on the SSH part of it. And also work on Loki because Loki is another big one. If you want to head over, I guess I can show you my personal site, which I'm going to record a video about here in a second. So I'm also working on Loki, which is the cryptocurrency intelligence platform. That's I'm kind of working on that in the background, but essentially, if you want to look and see what that does, it's nothing super interesting right now. I'm just kind of like deploying, like smaller parts of the tool first. So let's go to Pump Fun, the worst possible website ever. Of course, it's a Trump token. Good. It's a Hamas themed Trump token. Fantastic. Looks like that's getting rugged like right now. So if you pop over to here, all this really does is pull down the information relating to the mint. Nothing super interesting here. The majority of the work that I've put into it is the actual blockchain scanning part of it, and that's not currently running publicly. I'm just running that locally just because it doesn't need to run on a server quite yet. But yeah, that's going to be a lot of my attention going forward, is basically going to be split between Scout and Loki, and kind of like splitting my efforts between those two. But yeah, if you ever want to know like specifics about what I'm doing, I put like daily development logs up now on this site. So you can go and check those out there. You can also see the lines of code for each project, which I personally think is kind of cool. That's something that I added today. Claude helped me out with that a little bit. But yeah, that's about it. Take it easy. Peace.